tell us a bit about how you look at back injuries and getting people back onto the bike.
Yep. So what I want to do is establish what the person can do, and then start to increase that ability, basically. So you've got to work out if you can't do that because they're injured somehow, you've got to manage that. But most people, there's a little doorway of health you can get into, and then just sort of slowly increase that. As a professional note, the one thing I hate that professionals do is say you should rest. I take it as a given that if you're coming to me, it's because you don't want to rest. Because let's face it, I didn't have to go to university for 5 years to tell people to rest. That's a gimme. Yeah. So you can get that off the internet in 30 seconds. So I'm assuming you don't want to rest and you want to get healthier. So I'm just looking for that little corridor that is actually working in that patient, and then we'll start going down there and try and make it bigger as we go. Okay. Basically, if you're going to be a bike rider, you need two physical attributes to be good, and one is strength and the other is endurance. So just putting aside strength for a moment, if we're going to deal with endurance, then there's certain ways we can increase our endurance, and one is by increasing efficiency, and the other is to remove barriers to inefficiency. So you can increase your efficiency by being more aerodynamic, so you can have better hamstrings, so you can get down lower, you can get a lighter bike, you can get a more aerodynamic bike. You can look at your metabolic efficiency, and so you concentrate on your nutrition. That's where you come in. Yep. Now where I come in is because most people naturally have a fair bit of endurance, but what the people I tend to see, they have barriers to their endurance. So what I might see is their breathing might be really bad. So the thing that it's easy to forget is that any and all watts you produce on a bike to propel yourself forwards is at least partly made by the oxygen you breathe. And so I want to remove any barriers to your breathing mechanism so that you can run as efficiently as possible. The thing with that is, to demonstrate my point, I want to introduce you to two particular cyclists. One we're going to call the Greyhound, and one we're going to call the Bulldog. And the Bulldog is your typical mammal. He's got a stiff back and sit at the desk too long, and probably was fit once but isn't so fit now, is trying to get back into it. And then there's a Greyhound who's the pro. Now the professionals, the pros, they're greyhounds because they get a lot of power from their glutes, and so they can really, that's the biggest muscle in your body, and so you want it to be on your side when you're riding or doing any propulsive activity. They get all their power from their glutes and the back of their body generally, and their upper body is fairly relaxed on a bike, and that's the most efficient way it can be. And to demonstrate my point, if you've ever watched the beginning of the Melbourne Cup, like when the gates go up, the first thing the horses do is sink down into their haunches and woof, and they push off. And that's where they get all their power from. That's where bike riders do too. It's all, you got to get your glutes on the side.
Just the greyhounds.
Greyhounds or horses, sorry. Because they're the same basic plan, it's horses as well. The other thing you'll see, a horse at full gallop, they have their arm out, and it's really quite relaxed. Their front arm is actually just acting as a pivot to get their back legs up the front again so they can push off again. Their front legs aren't doing any propulsion, they're just sort of passing time. Same with bike riders, your upper body has to be really relaxed. Now let me introduce you to the Bulldog, which is a lot of what I see. The Bulldog is a typical mammal who's been sitting at a desk for too long, mammal being a middle-aged man in lycra, who has a slightly flexed upper back because they spend all their time on their computer, and then their back's really weak and flat and straight because they spend all their time sitting at a desk, which is not what a bike rider is. So when they're riding, they get all their power from their neck and from their shoulders. And so that means that all the body, the muscles they're using on their body, all their front muscles, so their hip flexors, their quads and their shoulders. And that does a couple of things. One is that it brings your center of gravity really high, and so it's a really unstable way to ride a bike. And if you practice it and sit really, use your shoulders, you actually find yourself moving forwards in front of the front hub, and then if anything happens, you just pivot around the front hub and whack. It's all bad. No one wants to do that. So the greyhounds, the pros, you'll see them all sit fairly far back in the saddle. and have really relaxed upper legs, upper arms. So
that's that Greyhound or horse mentality.
Yeah,
it's all driven.
It's all driven through the legs, and your upper body is relaxed. So the Bulldogs, they're all strong through the arms. They rise up. If they're rising over a small hill, they're out of the saddle and they're pushing like that, and their elbows are out, which decreases their aerodynamic efficiency as well. And they're anchoring through there, which is making them unstable. And the thing is that they're using their shoulders to stabilize their body so that their muscles on the front of their body can pull themselves up the hill. And so they're not actually really using their glutes or their hammies or any of the big muscles. And then lastly, but I think most importantly, is they constrict this part of their neck, and that's where you breathe from. Your thorax is a cage, a rib cage, and you breathe because there's a large muscle in here called the diaphragm, and it drags itself down. And as it drags itself down, it sucks air in. Now the other way you can breathe, that's the way we're supposed to breathe, and the other way you can breathe, and you can see this on smokers and asthmatics, is that they breathe with their neck. So instead of expanding their belly and their rib cage, they drag their rib cage up their neck. And your neck muscles are much, much smaller than your diaphragm muscles. So in an athletic sense, if you're breathing that way, you get exhausted really quickly because your neck muscles are smaller and they're not designed for that job. So the Bulldogs are holding onto the handlebars like that, trying to drag their rib cage up their neck. It adds an immediate block to how good you can get. And that's the bit that I'm really interested in. I like to change, because you don't actually have to fix the person. There's nothing wrong with them. We just have to tell them how to do this, and suddenly they've got a huge improvement with no extra weight, no extra cost, no extra, it's all benefit and no side effects. I'm a little bit puffed now, but I'm breathing through my diaphragm. My arms and the front of the bike are really relaxed. I'm getting my legs, the back of my legs are hitting the front of my seat. That brings me back, makes me more stable, activates my diaphragm, gives me more room to breathe. If I want to be the Bulldog, then I sit up much higher, straighten my arms, and I gotta breathe with my neck. And my knees might hit the handlebars. I might need a rest now. So one thing you guys might have noticed, if you're looking at the pro riders from the side, like in time trials, you see they look really fat and thick through the body. And that's because they're breathing so deeply with their diaphragm. So you'll see them really full through here. And that's because they have amazing breathing, because that's their job. So what happens, right, if you're riding like a Greyhound, if you're doing well, then you kind of set up an oscillation or a harmonic or something between you and the bike. Do you know what I mean? So that you're rocking yourself back and forth, and the force that's going through your bike really is only traveling through the pedals. So the handlebars are, made of crystal. So you're hopefully just, your grip can be fairly light, and you're just rocking back and forth like that. And in rhythm with your feet. You can't really do it when you're stationary. The guys, the Bulldogs, then they're like that, and they're pulling the bike back and forth like that, because they're trying to kind of claw their way up the hill, but that's not the way to do it, because they're putting all their force through the handlebars. So the way is to keep everything in the bike relaxed except where the power is coming out of your feet into the pedals. And if you do that, you kind of set up this harmonic like that, which is, I reckon, the most efficient way to get up the hill. That's what I think.